would implore his department to seek to return a man wrongfully deported to a maximum security prison in El Salvador, a man who had been deported in violation of a judge's order. And the department's response to this gross miscarriage of justice was not to accept responsibility or to take urgent action to correct the problem and seek the man's return. No, the department's response was to punish the department's own lawyer for speaking truthfully to the court, for what it deemed an act of insubordination, for failure to give full-throated defense to the department's illegal act. This is why we are here today. We are here today because the rule of law and democracy in the United States is under attack, not by a foreign adversary or some distant threat. The rule of law is being attacked and subverted from within, from an administration intoxicated by its own power and enabled by a supine Congress. Donald Trump is taking unprecedented steps to bend our justice system to his will, and his administration is moving systematically and swiftly to dismantle the legal pillars that hold up our democracy: the independence of the legal system, the idea of impartial justice, the right to counsel, and the principle that no one, not even a president, is above the law. If Donald Trump and his personal criminal defense lawyers now running the Justice Department succeed, the consequences will be profound. The impact will be felt by Americans from all walks of life and by future generations. This is why Ranking Member Raskin and I have taken the extraordinary step of convening this unprecedented hearing. We brought together both chambers of Congress, the Senate and the House, to conduct real oversight and to serve as a check and balance, to hold those who misuse power to account and to carry out our constitutional duty. Convening this hearing was not our first choice. We have tried to get our Republican colleagues to hold hearings, to do meaningful oversight, to assert Congress's authority as an independent branch of government. But to our great disappointment, our Republican colleagues have abdicated that important responsibility. They have stood by as the President has run roughshod over the legislative branch and turned Congress into little more than a rubber stamp. So today we'll hold the first of what we hope will be more bicameral oversight hearings. We will do the investigative work that our colleagues across the aisle refuse to do. We will expose the illegality, abuse, and corruption of this administration and within the Department of Justice. We will have brave witnesses speak to what's actually happening behind closed doors, how the Trump administration continues to try to intimidate them from speaking out, and why it matters to Americans across the country. The Trump administration is following a well-worn playbook. History serves as a guide and as a warning. In the 1930s, a Jewish lawyer in Berlin tracked in meticulous detail how Germany gradually became what he called a dual state. First, to keep the country running, the ordinary legal system remained in place for most people. And yet, step by step, a parallel system of governance and law emerged, what one scholar called a lawless zone. A parallel system carry out the will of the leader and to go after his enemies, real or perceived, to punish, to reward, to co-opt, to intimidate, silence, or take over institutions that make a society free and vibrant: the courts, the lawyers, the universities, the press, even businesses. And over time, the emerging authoritarianism would swallow what remained of the rule of law. And now Hungary provides a more present-day warning. Methodically, Viktor Orban has tried to dismantle the independence of Hungary's judicial system, its education system, and free press, undermining democracy while pretending to uphold the law. And we have our own history that we must not forget. In the 1950s, in this very institution, Senator Joseph McCarthy and his enablers wielded the power of the government to go after perceived enemies. Many shamefully did not stand up at the time. Some chose expediency, political gain, or profit. Others thought they could weather the storm by cutting deals or staying silent. If this sounds all too eerily familiar, it is because it is. But there is a silver lining and a reason for hope. Those who defended fellow Americans then are now rightfully viewed as vindicated by history. The courage demonstrated by Americans in decades past and by brave men and women in other countries should serve as our inspiration and a roadmap for standing up for the rule of law, for each other, and for our democracy. Today's hearing, therefore, is a step towards real oversight and accountability. Our witnesses have demonstrated remarkable courage. Like Ryan Croswell, who resigned after witnessing, as we all have, the corrupt use of the Department of Justice's prosecutorial power by striking an illicit bargain with the mayor of New York to do the administration's bidding. These witnesses refuse to enable a two-tier system of justice that grants favors and cuts corners for the famous or wealthy. And as we'll hear today, they bravely stood up to ongoing efforts by the Department of Justice to intimidate them from speaking today, including when they planned to send armed marshals to the home of one of our witnesses, Liz Oyer, in order to discourage her from testifying today. These witnesses, like Stacey Young, are supporting others who continue to serve the public interest, continue to be employed by the Department of Justice, and who cannot speak for themselves. One of our witnesses, Rachel Cohen, stood up when her law firm would not, even as other law firms beat a path to the White House to capitulate to the extortionary campaign of the executive branch, even as that campaign weakens the right to counsel, the right of free speech, and the right to take on unpopular causes. Today's witnesses represent the antidote to the collective action problem we have seen when law firms, universities, and other institutions race to the White House to cut their own deals rather than stand on principle. In this defining moment, our institutions must not grovel before power. They must not retreat. They must stand together. They must lead. Law firms, universities, public servants, Congress, each has a unique role, an important role to play, because a democracy that fails to hold power to account ceases to be a democracy at all, because we cannot allow the law to be twisted into a tool of personal or political vengeance or favor, and we cannot let threats to our democracy go unchallenged. Before we introduce the witnesses, let me turn to my colleagues, Ranking Member Raskin and Ranking Member Durbin, both of whom have demonstrated extraordinary leadership during this moment of profound challenge. I'm grateful that we are convening this hearing together, and I'm grateful for the courage of today's witnesses who have refused to remain silent. I now yield to my colleague, Mr. Raskin, for his opening statement, followed by Mr. Durbin.
Well, thank you, Senator Schiff, for those moving remarks, and thank you, Ranking Member Durbin. Thank you both for working with us to hold this oversight hearing, which Republicans on neither side of the Capitol were willing to call. Special thanks to our witnesses today. Your bravery is inspiring to an anxious nation today. Even in the face of great pressure, each of you has stood tall and held fast to your oath to uphold the Constitution and the integrity of the legal profession. Just as the president has crashed the stock market with his illegal tariffs, he has crashed the justice system with his dreadful appointments and vindictive policies. He's filled the leadership of the Department of Justice with his personal lawyers, unapologetically extremist sycophants like Kash Patel and Ed Martin, who elevate their devotion to Trump over any semblance of fidelity to the Constitution, the rule of law, and the rules of professional responsibility. Our witnesses are people who have refused to bow down and be complicit in the way so many of our colleagues have been complicit. The president fires dozens of DOJ lawyers simply for doing their jobs in prosecuting the January 6th insurrectionists who violently assaulted and wounded more than 140 of our police officers. The Republicans say nothing. The president issues executive orders banning disfavored lawyers and law firms from federal buildings, federal courthouses, federal employment, and federal security clearances unless they offer him blind loyalty and millions of dollars in free pro bono services for his pro-Malum causes. And the Republicans say nothing. Trump sacked 18 inspectors general who saved us $91 billion in actual waste, fraud, and abuse last year. His team gutted the Office of Public Integrity and suspended enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. They withdrew prosecution of New York City Mayor Adams on serious bribery and corruption charges because he formed an alliance with Trump, causing 7 top prosecutors to resign their offices, led by Danielle Sassoon, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, who clerked for Justice Scalia and was an active member of the Federalist Society. Our GOP colleagues are silent about these scandalous offenses. But House Republicans are outspoken about this. Many are calling for impeachment of the judges who've rendered 56 preliminary injunctions or temporary restraining orders against this reign of fear and terror. The president and Elon Musk go online and call them radical left rogue judges. Even Judge Boasberg, a pillar of the bar and chief judge of the D.C. District Court, who was first appointed to the bench by President Bush and was Justice Kavanaugh's roommate at Yale. We have only impeached 15 judges in the entire history of the United States, always for corruption offenses, bribery, tax evasion, habitual drunkenness, not even occasional drunkenness, habitual drunkenness, never for doctrinal disagreement with their rulings, much less when their rulings are manifestly correct. As Chief Justice Roberts put it a few weeks ago, the proper response to a decision you disagree with in the district court is to appeal the decision, not to impeach the judge. They're not making America great again, but they're definitely making the government corrupt again. We're grateful to you, witnesses, for having the courage to speak up against this outrageous corruption of our justice system as it came to affect you, and we're eager to hear your important stories. You will teach America how to stand tall. Ms. Oyer, I understand the Deputy Attorney General tried to send armed marshals to your home at night to deliver a clear message not to speak to us at today's hearing. And yet, I see you here today undaunted and unbowed, proving to Mr. Blanche and any other Trump official that you can't bully and silence everyone. That kind of courage is contagious, but we must emphasize to a watchful nation that courage is not the opposite of fear. Real courage, in fact, is experiencing all the fear, all the terror of these official threats and harassment, registering the fear of vigilante and online attacks, metabolizing the fear of your own government hounding you, but then pressing on anyway with conviction and passion for what you know to be right and lawful and just. No, courage, which is a virtue, is not the opposite of fear, which is an emotion, and indeed a necessary and adaptive emotion. Courage is a virtue, and it's the opposite of cowardice, which is a vice. The worst cowards are the tyrants and despots themselves who choose to terrify other people because they have allowed their own terrible fears and insecurities to turn them into monstrous, deformed, and cruel people. But the people who enable tyrants and despots, who do their bidding and work their will and flatter them and bow and scrape before them, they are cowards too, undoubtedly, at least if they have any choice in the matter. Every authoritarian regime runs on lies and runs on fear. Every authoritarian regime fears the truth and fears people who act justly and defiantly based on the truth. And that means they fear people like you and what you have to say to your fellow citizens. Thank you for recognizing the fear of this moment, feeling it, and nonetheless deciding to go ahead and act with courage and composure against the tyrant and his accomplices. I yield back to my very good friend, Senator Schiff, and I turn it over to Mr. Durbin for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Congressman Raskin. It's an honor to be here. All across America this last weekend, thousands of people, many whom never participated in a political event, came out to demonstrate their concern about the current state of the American government and what is happening with this administration. There were 1,000 in Springfield, Illinois, some 50,000 in Chicago, Illinois, and that story is repeated over and over again. We are at a unique moment in our history. Presidents have constitutional issues, virtually all do, but few have a constitutional crisis, which we are facing now in this country. I want to thank Congressman Raskin for coming here today, along with his colleagues from the House, and thank my colleagues from the Senate. But I want to particularly thank Senator Schiff. He's in a unique position, bridging the experience you had in the House of Representatives with this administration, and now your responsibility here in the United States Senate. I think this may be unique in American history, but it's certainly warranted, and I thank you for your leadership, Senator, in bringing us together. When you take a look at what we face today, it is truly a constitutional crisis. How did it start? Well, it certainly started with questioning a legitimate election and the outcome. Stop the Steal movement was an indication of pure effort to stop the Constitution from working its way. But the courts rejected President Trump's efforts to turn the results of the election, and now we see what he does in his second term. First, President Trump has gutted and weaponized the Department of Justice and our federal law enforcement agencies. The Justice Department is supposed to enforce our laws and protect our citizens, but President Trump appointed his personal attorneys to fill numerous senior positions at DOJ, including Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General. As many of us predicted, the new DOJ leadership has treated the Justice Department like the president's personal law firm. From dismissing corruption charges against Mayor of New York in exchange for supporting the president's policies, to restoring gun rights to domestic abusers who supported the president, to threatening universities that don't toe the MAGA line, the Justice Department has abandoned its commitment to the rule of law to advance the personal and political interests of Donald Trump alone. We need to fight back against this weaponized Justice Department. That's why I led the Judiciary Democrats in filing a bar complaint against Trump DOJ official Amo Bove for his role in corrupt bargaining with Mayor Adams. That's why I've led the Senate Judiciary Democrats in demanding an explanation from Attorney General Bondi for the firing of the pardon attorney and the restoration, for God's sakes, of Mel Gibson's gun rights. This brings me to the second way in which President Trump has threatened the rule of law, targeting law firms simply because they dared to employ attorneys who were involved in litigation or representations that the president didn't care for. We have long recognized the importance of parties before a court having representation by attorneys of their choosing, even in unpopular and politically charged cases. This goes back to the founding of the Republic. John Adams, our second president and one of the nation's founding fathers, famously represented 9 British soldiers accused of perpetrating the Boston Massacre. The right to counsel is so fundamental that it's enshrined in the Sixth Amendment. But instead of protecting and defending the Constitution, as he swore to do, President Trump has used his position to settle political scores and target law firms he deems insufficiently loyal. Over the past 2 months, he's issued executive orders and attempted to suspend security clearances, limit access to government buildings, and prohibit government contracts for certain firms. If those orders sound lawless, it's because they are. And multiple federal courts have appropriately blocked large portions of those executive orders. The Republicans on the floor and in the committee complain and moan and groan about all of the judicial cases that have been ruling against them, and many have. The fact of the matter is that this president has issued over 100 executive orders, many of which fly directly in the face of clear constitutional law. The president's actions pose an existential threat to the targeted law firms. Some have capitulated. For other firms, even the threat of future executive orders was enough to lead them to preemptively cut deals with the Trump administration. That, of course, is the point. The president wants to intimidate law firms so they'll think twice before taking on a client whose rights have been violated by the administration. That should alarm everyone. This is the kind of thing we expect from tin-pot dictatorships in other parts of the world. But these kinds of attacks on lawyers and the rule of law are unprecedented in the United States of America. They are not normal, and we cannot allow them to continue. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses, and thank you for your courage coming forward today. It's important that we hear this story that each of you has lived. And I want to close by saying to all those who gathered across America and who communicate through social media, asking what Congress is doing to try to stop these excesses and these violations of the Constitution, remember what happens on this day. Because on this day, I think we are making history at the right moment. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Ranking Member Durbin. We'll now introduce the witnesses, and these will be the briefest of introductions so we can leave more time for testimony and questions.